Happy Friday night. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. Cocktail time. It was just crazy a second ago. I probably should have put the camera on so you could have seen my rug falling down behind me, this thing falling, all of my Halloween bling just falling down around me. My light over here that you can't see just falling down. But I'm here. Happy Friday night. It is not a sign of things to come. It is going to be a great show. I'm going to spring up and get my other glasses. Holy mackerel, that was intense. Oh man, I'm telling you. Oh, did you see? Sorry. I mean, what a dirt bag I am. I'm not encouraging alcohol. I mean, we have plenty of alcoholics in our family tree. Not encouraging it, but I mean, come on. Our episode tonight is on witches. The idea of witches, the story of witches, the history of witches in terms of Halloween framework, but also witch patterns for rug hooking. They are one of the most popular seasonal motifs for sure. You know, Halloween, at least in ribbon candy hooking, I'm fooling with my set now, I'm scared. At least at ribbon candy hooking, Halloween outsells every other holiday by a lot, which is good because Halloween is my favorite holiday to design for. I think Christmas is my favorite holiday, but Halloween is so close behind it. And I'm hoping that tonight we can talk a lot about the history of Halloween, a lot about the different motifs, particularly the idea of the witch, the image of the witch, how that came to be, how that fits in with the rest of the holiday, all of that, and sort of dispel some myths, talk about it in a good academic way that's interesting and fun, and it'll make your Halloween projects, I think, a lot more meaningful. We're going to look at a lot of images of Halloween, some hooked rugs. I'm so hot and sweaty and stressed right now. My glasses are fogged up. I might have to put the fan on. My God, that was crazy. It was just crazy. Things were falling apart like poltergeist. Is this all Halloweeny already? Oh my word, Stephanie, it is great to see you. Happy Friday night. Gayla, happy Friday night. Great to see you, Mom. You are on to our dear hearts. Oh, you're so sweet. Oh, I was working on this episode until I literally left the house and came rushing over, and there was a massive traffic thing tonight. I got thinking, is it like a full moon or what? But I think it's just a crazy, crazy weekend night and nice weather, and people are going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Robin, cheers, my dears in Wisconsin. Great to see you. Kirsten, cheers. Ryan, cheers. Karen, cheers. Oh, you asked me a question. I forgot to look it up. I'll look it up later on. You've got your bourbon. You love your bourbon. I know that feeling because I love bourbon too. You can get that Maker's Mark with a custom label. They can say anything on it. I think that's really cool. We've done that before at Christmas time for the bourbon lovers in our family. Linda H., great to see you. Oh, let me see. I'm just scrolling down. Libations abound. Good for you. Cat's Gallery, happy Friday night. Oh, I think I'm skipping it. Susie, cheers. Good to see you. Lorraine, thank you. It's TJ Maxx or Marshalls. I think they have it at both. And it came with these socks, except with the thing falling down and the rug falling down, I lost the other sock. But this will be for another night. Still festive. It's funny. It came with a shirt and a pair of pads, and I'm thinking, well, that's not a complete outfit. I feel like we're missing the bottom half. That could be a huge problem heading out the door. Ryan, happy Friday. Hard seltzer and Mexican food. Oh, that sounds amazing. Dave, great to see you. I haven't had a chance to watch that video yet. I can't wait. I'm saving it to savor it. Oh, chicken and red wine. Take out chicken at that. That sounds amazing. And Lynn says, drinking hot chocolate with coffee in it. That's a great idea. My pool was on the cold side. That is so luxurious. That is so much fun. So, I really lucked. Oh, here's the other sock. I'm telling you, how did it get under there? Something fell and knocked the socks around, knocked my socks off. I had so much fun researching this show. I was looking at a lot of rugs, a lot of Halloween rugs. Of course, they're not all witches. And tonight we are focused just on the idea of witches and the story of witches. I put some good text together that I think is really helpful. You remember I used to be a tour guide right before I had the kids. So that was my last proper career. And that was a long time. And, we often did things like I took a lot of bus tours through Smithsonian into Salem. which, you know, at least in the U.S. is considered the witch capital, although in Connecticut a lot more witches were put to death than in Salem for that one winter. We're going to come to that in the text tonight, but I had a lot of fun going over some notes that I'd had from like many years ago, and learning some new things that, you know, I think just walking into this, I want to look at a lot of images tonight, and we're going to look at, as they say, some rugs that that Ribbon Candy Hooking has out, so that my brand does. Rugs that other brands have done that feature witches. We're just focused on witches tonight. We're going to look at ghosts. We're going to look at specific stories. Like I think I'll do a Lizzie Borden episode, maybe at one of these coffee times this coming week or the next. So we're going to look at different sort of scary horror themed October things. But we never look at, you know, I don't look at things in a stupid way. I always look at things in an academic way, and I'm looking for truth and meaning. And for me, the holidays are, let me take one quick sip. I was running around like a banshee. Maybe an episode on banshees. It's a bit too Irish, isn't it? Remember Darby O'Gill in The Little People? The banshees in that movie? Ryan, what season of The Witch? Is that a show? It says I'm drinking hot chocolate. Oh, sorry, my thing just scrolled back out. This is going to be a great start to the weekend. And I just felt so festive doing this research. So I wrote some notes down for myself, and then we'll look for a series of slides. I put a big slideshow together, and I hope to get to it all. Let's start by looking at the thumbnail that I put into place today. What I was about to say was I have some pictures of hooked rugs by Ribbon Candy Hooking, by other brands, but I have a lot of, you know, I'm trying to be thoughtful about showing things that are not 100% other people's brands, because I'm a brand too, and I tend to, and it's so self-serving and awful, and I'm sorry because I'm not a selfish person, but often on these cocktail nights I show all other people's work, and then I get lots of thank you letters from other companies saying, oh, thank you for featuring us, we're making crazy sales, and I realize I'm not making any sales the whole week, and then I start to panic about bills and stuff. So I was trying to do this in a thoughtful way, and Jane in Wales was helping me. We were pulling a lot of vintage postcards, which is a big thing. And I just want to remind you, Cushing, of course, does a lot of vintage postcards. Not as many Halloween, I think, as other holidays like Christmas. Anybody can do vintage postcards. You can too. As a result of this work that I did, it was a whole day effort here getting the show together. I put together a lot of new patterns that are based on the vintage postcards that I found that I have not seen before, including some that I own because I like to collect Halloween ones. Halloween ones are really expensive because they're fairly rare compared to all of the other holidays. I mean, you get more President's Day postcards than you get Halloween postcards, truly. So I have a bunch of those. I'll remind you at the end of the show. Those are up on Ribbon Candy Hooking. If you see images that you like tonight that are of the vintage postcards that I'm showing, you know that you can hook those. Those are public domain. You don't need me to tell you. You don't need to buy them from me or Cushing or anybody. If you like them and you are okay with transferring patterns and you have that down and you've got your backing fabric, you know that you can do that. If you like some of the ones you see tonight, I am putting them up in Ribbon Candy Hooking, and I don't think they are ones that repeat to any other brand. So I was trying to be a bit careful about that, although I don't have infinite time to check everybody's store out either. Barbara, great to see you. Donovan's song. All right. Ryan, can you send me a note about that so I can look it up on YouTube later? Sounds good. All right. So, you know, I started with, I want to back into it a little bit because I remember from my tours that a lot of people were not fond of talking about Halloween. And I really, you know, I'm going to back way out of this for a minute. And I just want to say, I just personally feel like these days, unlike past days, the holidays are always under attack somehow. We are changing the names of holidays. I'm not doing a soapbox thing, I promise. They're always changing and evolving. They always have changed and evolved. Every holiday, including and maybe especially Halloween, is based on hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and everything that has snowballed since. All of those generations, each one putting their special stamp, their special twist, a special custom onto the holiday, and it morphs into something different over time. Now, to back out of it, I was going to bring you the thumbnail, and I got away from doing that. To back out of it and bring it really broad, just to kind of do an intro. Teresa, happy Friday night. Cheers, my dears. Priscilla, cheers, my dears. I'm going to take another sip for you. So this is the Halloween postcard that I used for the thumbnail tonight. This would make a great rug hooking pattern, right? If this is your style and you like this, you could well use this pattern. I am going to put all of the images, all of the vintage postcards that I'm using tonight into a blog over the weekend. So you will have access to all of these images. You don't have to search for them. I'm going to put them into a blog and I'm going to load them up online, and I'm going to put a link on our Facebook page, which is Rug Hooking and Symbol Punch Needle Club, and you'll be able to find them all there if you fall in love with something. Lori says, "Hello, so happy to be with you too. Great topic tonight. We are Halloween lovers, I think." My BD is on the 31st as well. Oh, that is so cool. You're a Halloween baby. I believe in fun for this holiday. I believe in fun. I believe in fun too. You know, this holiday goes back, as most people know, it has Celtic roots in a holiday that used to be called Samhain, which is spelled Samhiem, right? Celtic, totally different pronunciation. And the reason that it was brought forth was because, and this is like a calendar thing, right? This is not a devil thing. This is a calendar thing. You know how people always talk about with Halloween the thin veil, the thin line between the different worlds? Well, that is because Halloween is the absolute midpoint between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. So Halloween is called a cross-quarter day. That is a fact. That is calendar stuff. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a second. On cross-quarter days, the worlds are close together. This goes back to ancient belief, right? This is not Wiccan stuff. This is truly pagan stuff. This goes back to ancient days, ancient thought. So Halloween, smack between autumn equinox, winter solstice, is a special day, believed to have special powers. The counterpart to Halloween on the calendar is Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day is also a cross-quarter day. And Valentine's Day, unlike Halloween, it's the opposite, right? Valentine's Day represents rebirth, regrowth, spring about to happen, fertility, right? But Halloween represents the opposite at the end of the year. Think about what the season is doing at this time of the year. It represents death. It represents passing. It represents coming to peace with being mortal, with knowing that we will all pass. And over the centuries, literally over the centuries, because people were celebrating Halloween like in the 300s with St. Augustine. So this is not a new holiday, which I'm sure you also know. So with the idea of death, right, the whole thing is that Halloween, we play with this idea. We try to face death. This sounds morbid, but it's not. It's done in play. It's done in theater. We face other people who are dressed in costumes, and traditionally, these kinds of costumes, my mom says, "Oh, cross-quarter days, never heard of those. Got to look it up." It's exciting. When you break down the calendar, it's exciting because there's a reason why all of these days are found where they are on the calendar. So the idea of facing the most scary thing, death, in costume, in the manner of play, you're facing other people who are traditionally dressed as ghosts, as I don't want to say devils because it's not going to be devils like goblins, fairies, otherworldly creatures, not devils, right? The thing about this holiday, and I'm going to put it right out here at the beginning of the episode because I know Halloween can be a controversial holiday. I celebrate it hugely. The thing about Halloween, and just bear with me for a minute, because let me just back out so this makes even more sense. The thing about Halloween is it's based on a calendar date, and it's based on harvest seasons, the time of year, it being a cross-quarter day. It counters Valentine's Day. This all makes sense, but only because the calendar makes sense. You have to remember, if you've ever read about the calendar or read any history about the calendar, centuries ago, there was an issue with the calendar where there were two calendars, and there was a fight over what calendar would work. One of them was called the Julian calendar, and that was made up by Julius Caesar. And that makes a lot of sense because we have months that are named, for example, July, after Julius, and also August, right? So I mean, when you make up the calendar, you can name at least 2 months for yourself, and he did. So after that calendar, immediately after that, we had the Gregorian calendar, right? And this is more of like a religious-based calendar. So these calendars are at odds with each other. And when the Gregorian calendar comes out, there is a time in October, I don't remember the specific dates, but you lost basically 11 days. So there was a time, I don't know why I keep going out of focus, where you would go to sleep on, say, the 4th or 5th of October, and you would wake up and it would be the 15th. And this was just one of the flaws of the Gregorian calendar. But these calendars were at odds for a long time. And there were people celebrating both calendars at the same time, which, as you can imagine, created a lot of trouble. Because if you have ever lived in Europe or vacation there, you noticed sometimes early in December, Christmas is celebrated, like a sacred holy Christmas is celebrated, unlike the gift-giving Christmas on the 25th. That's because earlier in December, that is the Gregorian calendar Christmas, and later in the year, that is the sort of secular or Julian calendar Christmas. I might not be explaining that just right, but there is a break in calendars. And it creates the difference between holidays that are Christian holidays and holidays that are secular holidays. So having said that, without being offensive, Halloween will become, at a certain point in its yearly celebrations, there will be an attempt to Christianize the holiday. When that happens, the nature of the holiday changes, right? So, for example, the very thing, this used to drive me crazy when I was a tour guide. There's also a Mayan calendar, absolutely. I'm thinking Eurocentric because I'm thinking like Europeans and then Europeans settling the US, like what their mindset was in not so much world, but absolutely. We should talk about that stuff too, because the Mayan calendar and all of their visual calendars, those circular calendars, are absolutely beautiful for design motifs, right? So one of the things that is really important to say when we look at images from Halloween is that when Halloween was first celebrated, there was not the idea, because this is like the time of St. Augustine, there was not the idea that if you dressed up like a devil, you were representing the devil or you were in league with the devil, right? Just if you liked things that were ghoulish and ghostly and macabre, you were not in league with the devil. And you know why? Because St. Augustine had a very strong feeling, this is pure historical, not opinion. He had a very strong feeling that to be in league with a divine source, that source would have to exist. And he didn't believe in anything but God. He did not believe in the devil, so there was no such thing as if you dressed up like a devil character or a macabre type character, a dark character, that you were in league with the devil and therefore suspicious. That wasn't a thing. You could dress up like a witch, like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. No one would think you were a witch because you wouldn't, as a human being, have the divine power to be in league with a truly divine power. You're just a human, right? So that whole idea that people go too far with Halloween and dressing up like witches and ghosts, that idea came about after Halloween began to be Christianized and fitted into a more Christian calendar and a more Christian series of holidays, right? That is not the original intention of the holiday, and that is not the way that Celtic people celebrated this day. So I think that's worth knowing, because there's a lot of arguments that come up about, oh, it's such a dark holiday. Everybody's always dressed like the devil. It's so evil. Everybody's always doing evil things. That's not at all the origins of the holiday. Not at all. So it's good to get away from that, get a little space from that, because Halloween represents facing death. It represents the end of the trees, of the seasons, of the leaves, of everything falling, everything ending, going into this dark period. And for one night, when the heaven and the earth are close together with this thin veil between them, for that one night you play in a whimsical way with the idea that it is okay, that death is okay, that what's coming next is okay. And it was traditionally meant to be liberating and fun and not grotesque and linked to the devil. So I think that's a really important distinction to be made. Let's talk rugs. Ellen, let's do it. So there's not a lot of rugs today because this is more of a Halloween episode, but I do have a few rugs. So let's see, we're talking about symbolization, and particularly tonight we're talking about the symbol of the witch. And she has all kinds of crazy origins, and they are not evil at all. So let's look at some of the images that I have. There's going to be a lot. We'll see how far we get. Dave says, pumpkin tip. After carving, rub a little Vaseline over the cut edges. Keeps them, oh, you're kidding, keeps them fresh for longer. Oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I wonder how that would fit in with my pumpkin tip. This is not such a nice one. So our pumpkin tip, I'm going to use yours because we're about to carve our pumpkins. My pumpkin tip is when your pumpkin has been outside for a month and it's truly disgusting and animals are like feasting on it and it's no good to anyone, we have one last blast with the pumpkin and we put them on the steps and put them on the lowest step and we stand on the highest step and put the light on inside of them like a little candle and then we spray hairspray into them and fire comes shooting out of their faces and the kids love it. It's super exciting. Zoe, good to see you. Thank you. Just setting up for a month of Halloween, and it is gonna be fun. It really is gonna be so much fun. So let's see. I had this one early on, images to consider. Let's see what it brings us to next. So this isn't a witch image, but again, I'm backing into our subject because this is really our first Halloween episode. Now, this goes back to the idea of what the devil's place is in Halloween. This is a great postcard. This is a great image. This would be wonderful to hook. I think if I was hooking this, I'd take out that third character in the back because I'm not sure that he is necessary. He's just bringing the wood to add more wood to the fire. This actually comes from a really interesting story because do you know that the story of the jack-o'-lantern in terms of being a symbol? Oh, hey, Doreen. Fire sounds fun. Oh, thank you. Dave, you love it, the fire. Pyromania. The idea of the jack-o'-lantern, you know, that goes back to this great story, and this is another ancient story, that the way that fire came to like civilization was that I don't remember who, but some character, as in all of these stories, went down to hell to the devil and stole fire, holding it inside a gourd, right? Like smuggled it out of hell in a gourd and brought it up to earth. And ever since we have had fire. That is one of the European stories that explains how we got fire in the first place. So the jack-o'-lantern is the symbol of that. It is a gourd that is supposed to represent fire inside. And that is why we use the jack-o'-lantern at Halloween. I mean, isn't that cool? And isn't it cool to know that this postcard, that's like a maybe 10s, 1920s postcard, that knowledge was so... They would make wonderful rugs, Zoe. I'm going to have to do this one, and I am going to take that character out in the back. But I just love these devil figures. I love the different tones of their skin. I love the crazy bellows. I mean, there is something crazy going on here. The jack-o'-lantern looks very sort of, it looks like a titillating thing that's happening here, but not necessarily painful. It's just a fairly exciting image, isn't it? But isn't it funny to know that at the beginning of the 20th century, when this postcard was made and this image was being passed around, people still knew the story of why we use jack-o'-lanterns and about the fire and about hell, because they're showing the devils like stoking the fire inside the jack-o'-lantern. I just think that's interesting because over the course of time, I think for the most part, until I read that, I did not know that. That was not one of those at the front of my mind kind of ideas. And I just think it's interesting that we got so far away from that. And you will notice if you go down the rabbit's hole and you start looking at vintage images of Halloween, you will notice Prometheus brought fire up, Karen. You know, so is it Prometheus who's in that story, Karen? Is that whose name is escaping me? That's a very big name, but I wouldn't be surprised because the story is filed in the back of my head. Oh, thanks, Teresa. It's so much, it makes everything so much more fun to know some background, I think. But, you know, looking at vintage sources for Halloween images, you will find a lot of gourds and not just pumpkins. And that's because of this fire from hell story and these origins that go back hundreds of years to this story. I just think it's super, super interesting that so many, if you go down the rabbit hole, so many of these images do feature gourds. So in this case, we've got kind of a composite of images here. We've got the devil figure, who's a lot like Krampus. You know, Krampus from Christmas. We'll be talking about Krampus when we get closer to Christmas. Ellen, thank you so much. I love that symbol too, the little jumping video game man. But not just pumpkins. You know, there's like a pear. There's a different kind of a melon in here. So we're really pushing the envelope. Our witch characters in here, we're about to come to the witch. She has like, she's like a medium character, right? She has access to both worlds. The now and the after. She is in between that thin veil. She has fortune-telling abilities. We're about to come more to her story. And of course, the black cat, which is always known as her familiar. So interesting, isn't it, that all of these characters would be featured in kind of a parade situation on the same postcard. These are all great images. More images that I just pulled up as we creep into witches. These are just all weird, gourd Halloween images. But you can see they would make great compositions. And again, these images are copyright free. I will be putting them into the blog. You'll have access to all of them if you're just joining us. Sharon, great to see you. And you know, the cat is kind of screeching at the gourds because they're a bit scary, right? They have potential to contain fire. There's a lot of symbolism in that. I think it's just interesting because we're getting, when you're using these kinds of colors of these different gourds, not just pumpkins, you're able to tap into that colorful harvest palette, right? Because sometimes Halloween colors are just black, orange, purple, a little bit of yellow for the moon. But if you tap into the wider palette of all of these harvest colors, the gourd colors, because you're tapping into that underlying historical Halloween storyline, then that gives you a lot more to play with. Karen says, I have antique Child's Halloween parade lantern. Oh, you're kidding. And Karen, what is it made out of? Is it a paper lantern? The reason I ask is because, you know, I was born in the Netherlands and then I lived in the Netherlands for years as an adult. And I had both the kids over there. And they don't celebrate Halloween. They celebrate St. Martin's Day. And on St. Martin's Day, it's similar to Halloween, but you take a gourd, right? So say it's the gourd is still referring to the fire that's stolen from hell and brought to earth. And of course, fire is what keeps us alive. You can't have heat and survive. You can't cook your food without fire. It's absolutely essential. The gourd is the thing. So lately, over the last decades, they celebrate Halloween more, and it's more likely to knock on someone's door and you have to sing the song, Saint Martin, Saint Martin. You have to sing the song. It's not a trick or treat. But you bring your gourd, and it doesn't have to be a pumpkin. It probably won't be a pumpkin. When we went trick-or-treating, when we did St. Martin's Day with the kids, I dressed them up, because of course I'm American. I dressed Teddy up on his very first little St. Martin's Day as a little scarecrow. I wish I had the picture. I'll show you another time. So cute. I made his costume from scratch. And he had his little gourd that was lit from the inside, hanging on the end of a stick. And the gourd was a turnip. It was a giant turnip. So it was a little bit different, but we figured out by things that, you know, pictures in people's windows and stuff, if they had images of Halloween or St. Martin's, we knew that they might have candy. So we knocked on those doors and he did his St. Martin, St. Martin. You sing outside the door and somebody will open the door and maybe give you candy, or sometimes hear you sing and just say that was very nice and not have anything for you. And that in the Netherlands, that's okay. You're not going to get a trick if you do that. Why is there space between the two E's? That's a good question. So it's referring to the word hollow is separate from een, and een is an abbreviation of evening. So also in like a lot of Broadway songs, they abbreviate like evening like into E apostrophe E-N, and it's just evening, one syllable. So it's got the word hallow and the word, which is like sacred, right? But it's a special night because it's that cross-quarter night. So it's a hallow evening. And that's why they put the two together. Traditionally, we've dropped the apostrophe over the years, but it is evening. So it was a composite kind of a word. Whitney says, oh, wait a minute, Quiltessa, a newbie. Good to see you. I bet you're a quilter too. Haven't hooked yet. Got all my supplies. Well, good time to get started, or you just stick with us and do your quilting. You know, you can use your quilting fabric to hook too. You can use all those great cottons from the quilt store. It's all good. It all crosses over. There's really no distinction. Lily, you're on. Well, I'm glad you're on it all. You love witches. Me too. I love all the stories that go with this time of year. It's so rich in history. Whitney says, hi, Deana. Happy Friday, recovering from wiping out on the treadmill at Planet Fitness on Wednesday. Left knee horribly bruised and ache all over. At least got a 30-minute workout and 200. Whitney, you've been having some crazy. I am so sorry to hear that. I hope that it was painful and there was damage, but I hope it wasn't also super embarrassing. That is such a bummer. I am so sorry to hear that. I hope it's a quick recovery. You know, this week Joss also blasted her knee out twice by falling. She fell twice on the same knee, and she's got a horrible knee situation now. Want a kit? I've got kits. I've got tons of kits, that's for sure. I think I caught up on the thread. Let's come back here. So we kind of diverted to St. Martin's, but that's a European holiday. That's a specifically Dutch holiday. So I'm just kind of blazing through these. Some of these are images that you will find on Ribbon Candy Hooking, right? That I've put some of these in as patterns that you can get. Email me if you want to quilt, but I'm just making the point that we're looking at a lot of vegetables. And it's not just pumpkins, is it? It's a lot of vegetables. It's just kind of funny Merry Halloween. You know, there is the crossover here too, between Halloween and Christmas. There are going to be, we'll get to this again later in the episode, there are a lot of crossovers between celebrating Christmas and Halloween. It is, like my grandmother always used to say, the landslide, as soon as you hit Halloween, you're going to blink, and I'm sorry, but it's true, it's going to be New Year. You're going to blink and it's going to be New Year. Right after Halloween, you're going to close the door from handing out candy and it's going to be New Year. It's just the way that it is. Look at these images of all of these crazy gourds. They all have faces, which is so exciting. But I particularly love this postcard because it says a joyous Halloween. One of the things that Halloween represents that has changed over the years that I really like about the holiday, because at first, as we said earlier, it was about facing loss and death, right? It was about leaving the autumn. Everything is about to die. Everything is about to get cold and dangerous and dark and a bit scary. And then you're looking forward to that cyclic change and everything regrowing again. You're looking forward to the spring. So it's all about death. But because all holidays are moving targets and all holidays are products of the people who celebrate them, we all want to put our special twist on every holiday. We all do. Every family does. Every person does. You maybe want to do what your family did growing up. You want to do the same thing. We feel that so strongly, I think, at the holidays. We like to put our own twists on it. And over the years, Halloween has moved from being kind of a celebration and a bit of theater revolving around the subject of death to being quite joyous, like this postcard says, to being a lot of fun, to having some laughs, to having some play, right? It's not quite as dark. It's not so much of a confrontation as it is an exercise in play, in dressing up, in being someone else, in feeling something else, right? It's a real, unlike every other holiday for me, it's maybe with the exception of Mardi Gras, it's a real put yourself out there kind of a day. I just love this one. And I love the introduction in this one. It's not just a purely gourd composition. Also the black cats, right? So they're trying to introduce other motifs that at this time, which was the very early 20th century, were emerging as other motifs. So ones like this, a little bit problematic, right? Like a little bit insensitive stereotype, more than a little bit happening here. But you can see the kinds of imagery that we are seeing in late 19th century, early 20th century. Strange sights are seen on Halloween. So again, the idea of the pumpkin with the fire inside of it blasting its light out, except in this case, the pumpkin is a costume. So yeah, a lot of different things coming and going, right? Things are changing quickly. And then we get this kind of very unexpected image coming from around the same time, 20s, 30s, a family of turnips. You know, I was wondering what the sort of parentage is on this, because we got a pumpkin who's produced 2 turnips, but we won't ask any questions, right? That's a bit indelicate. But I mean, it is a lovely composition. We've got a pumpkin wearing kind of a fez, or maybe some kind of a candy bowl, with 2, the offspring is 2 turnips, with a candy, right? Or candy, or maybe like the one on the left might have a little bag or a little dessert. That might represent the salmon cake that we're gonna talk about in a little while. Just pre-order. Oh, thanks, Ellen. I was so disappointed. I found out, I think last week on the show, one of the viewers told me the date got pushed back to February. Ellen, you know, one of your images is on the cover. Did you notice that? And it's cited too, so you'll be cited on that. They didn't consult me about the cover. They just showed me the image. Actually, they didn't show me the image of the cover. I looked at it on Amazon, and one of those images is yours. So you have a huge section in that book. It's going to be really exciting. I just love this image. It has a bit of like, I don't know, like a bit of a Norman Rockwell feel to it, but it's this family of gourds. Yeah, it's unexpected, isn't it? Funny, haha, my dad was a turnip. Sharon, my dad was a turnip. Is there like a rock song called My Dad Was a Turnip, or a rock band or something? Oh, Lily, the book is on Amazon. Just look up my first and last name, Deana David, and you'll find it that way. I think it's called Easy and Beautiful Rugs. I'll put the link. I think the link is in the description of the video, actually. I'll never be able to do it while I'm live, but it's definitely around, and I'll put it in the Facebook group again. Or if someone has the link, if you can put it up, that'd be great. Now, this is a rug that I think we're pretty familiar with. For me, this is kind of like the definitive Halloween rug, and this is called The Witch's Consort, and this is by Tish Murphy. This is an extraordinary rug. We have looked at this one before, and I honestly can't get enough of it. It's 30 by 14, number 5 and number 6 cut wool on monk's cloth. Tish Murphy, 2012, designed and hooked by Tish of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's available at tishkitsrughooking.com. That's TISH kits at rughooking.com. Kit or pattern can be purchased. This is just an extraordinary image, very atmospheric image of a witch. And in this case, with a crow, blackbird, raven, what do you think this is? Some kind of corvid type thing? This is a great rug. This is one I think we're pretty familiar with because this has been certainly in Rug Cooking Magazine, maybe Celebration. I always forget between Ather Rug Cooking Celebration. It is an extraordinary rug. I love this depiction of a witch because she seems very serene, very cerebral, very strong. She's not like, ah! She's not that kind of a witch. She's got it together. I mean, look at her nails. She looks like she spent some time getting it together. I love the tone of her skin. I love her hair. I love the bats. I love the creatures in the background. It's truly raven. Thank you. It's truly amazing. I like how the idea of, I'm going to go off on a little detour now again. I just want to be sure you can see the shirt at the same time. The idea of a bird or the black cat or something is playing off the idea of the consort or, in more familiar terms, the familiar, right? Because the idea, at least in the U.S., that every witch has a close relationship with a member of the animal world, and that would include birds, is one of these like enduring ideas in early America. And it's a scary one because when people were suspected of being witches, which happened all the time and not just in Salem. I mean, people were truly at liberty to say that's a witch. And if that person was your neighbor and you had been coveting their land for all these years, and you suddenly get the idea, well, if I say they're a witch, that person might be taken out of the equation, and then I can expand my farm. This happened all the time. This is well documented as having happened all the time. This is an ugly side of human nature, and this is the way it was. People were constantly accusing other people for really selfish motives. There's always those kinds of people, right? You always get them. They existed hundreds of years ago, too, in early America. If somebody was accused of being a witch, in many places, right, not every settlement was the same, but in many places in New England, one of the first things they would do to test you was to make you sit on a stool in the center of town, in some cases for 24 hours straight. Some cases more, some cases less. But the idea was, picture yourself sitting on a stool in the center of town, right? They're not going to let you get up to go to the bathroom, right? So you're probably going to have all kinds of accidents. It's going to be truly humiliating. It's going to be a horrific day. You are probably a bag of nerves. And you are so hoping that no animals come up to you. Because if you're sitting there and the neighbor's dog or some friendly cat comes up to you, that's it. You're done. You're done. You are on trial, or they're just putting you in the water to see if you can float, right? I mean, it's not going to go well. What are the chances of sitting there for a day in like this kind of setting, like in the 1600s, and an animal not coming up to you? Animals were just roaming around the streets in those days. It was absolutely a losing scenario. There was no way you were going to win. So the idea of a familiar is kind of a scary one because your familiar would have to be a real secret, right? So an image like this is kind of interesting because for the witch, it's not a secret. She is really obviously talking to the bird. And this would be a real problem. So it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit scary because of that. God, is anybody looking? Kind of a thing. But of course, it's a work of fiction. It's a work of art. It is Karen. It's an absolutely fabulous. Do you know why ravens and bats are associated with witches at Halloween? As far as I know, Linda, just as familiars. I haven't been able to find anything different. I haven't done a ton of research specifically on bats and ravens yet. Maybe those will be 2 upcoming episodes. But for my research on witches, those are 2 of the animals, along with black cats, that are the most common animals to be seen as like the familiars of or friends of a witch, a person who is like a medium. But I think one of the things I was going to say at the beginning of the episode was if you have ideas for other episodes this month, let me know. Because I think I might run some extra evening episodes this month during the week, just as we get closer to Halloween, just to keep things lively and exciting, learn a little bit, and I learn a little bit too when I do my research. But I could dive a bit more, certainly into ravens and bats, without a doubt. This is another cute rug. That was a great witch. The I do that as often as I can to the kids, and it really gets them. It really gets them. Bats only come out at night. That's a good reason, Karen. That makes a lot of sense because I don't think at this point, like at least early America, going up through the early 20th century, I'm not sure that I'm not sure for myself how linked the idea of, for example, a vampire and a witch are. Now that Halloween is a big deal, that's since the 1950s, right? So now we think about monsters like a witch as being one of the monsters, but years ago we definitely didn't group monsters together. They all had a special function and did something different. And of course, certain monsters like Frankenstein are the product of Mary Shelley in fiction, and a vampire the result of Bram Stoker and Dracula, and pulling on that lore that was already there, but really bringing it to the forefront. So interesting. So you didn't suggest that at all, but I'm just saying because a bat is sometimes associated with Dracula, those things wouldn't have gone together during the early Halloween period. Eugenia, great to see you. Adore the Witch and the Mouse. Oh, did I have a witch and a mouse? Oh, this is the Witch and the Mouse. This is an adorable piece. So this is called, hold on one second. Let me come back down to it. This is called Witch Hazel. And this is a pattern. I think I got this from Etsy. Let me see. Witch Hazel. Hang on. My notes are a little bit out of order. They came flying out of the printer and they fell on the floor. And just as you would expect, they fell out of order and the page numbers didn't print because they got cut off. So, Witch Hazel. I know I have it somewhere. Wait, give me one more minute. Let me see. I don't want to not cite an excellent rug here. I did find this on Etsy. You could certainly find it by Googling Witch Hazel. I just wanted to, oh, I know who it is. I remember who it is. It's Two Old Crows. Two Old Crows, NJ, New Jersey. That's who it was. Whew, it's good to sometimes have a semi-photographic kind of a memory. Definitely Two Old Crows, NJ. That's exactly what I saw. When I get to it in the paperwork, I'll just confirm that. But another adorable, adorable pattern. And this one by the Star Rug Company, a more realistic witch. Oh, good, you're saying hi to each other from Maryland. Oh, excellent, excellent. Finding each other on the map there. This is so realistic. In this case, an owl, right? So an owl always represents wisdom. And sometimes we're looking at witches who are scary and mischievous, and sometimes we're looking at witches who have a lot of earthy knowledge, right? That is the original kind of a witch that's associated with Halloween. In the 20th century, we get more into the evil witch, the mischievous witch. But originally, the idea of a witch was somebody who had a lot of knowledge of natural herbs, early medicine, right? So this kind of a person would be very good at mixing things up, locating things in nature, identifying things, creating cures that would maybe sometimes work, maybe accidentally, coincidentally, or truly work. So this is more that kind of a witch who's got some mushrooms out. She's got the wise old owl on her shoulder that maybe is giving her some tips from the natural world about what she needs to do to have success in the cauldron, right? It does look like punch needle, doesn't it? It looks very small scale. I think you're right, Karen. That would make a lot of sense. This is Star Rug Company, so this is another. I love the purple too. That's a good observation, Susie. I didn't even notice. It is definitely more purple than black. I love the purple too. It's a bit of a royal color. It gives her a bit of status, a bit of pedigree. It goes great against the red mushrooms, and it gives you good contrast against that black cauldron. That's the thing with the Halloween images, is sometimes they can be so black and dark that you lose track of what you're looking at. This is another great image. Again, Star Rug Company. I love the softness of the hooking. Yeah, I do too. And I think Karen's right. I think it's punching. I think it's the mini punch. So this could be like Valdani, like one of these sort of higher end threads that you punch with a DMC kind of a needle. Not a DMC, what an ultra punch kind of a needle. Pretty punch, something like that. But yeah, it's probably very small, very fine, but the pattern is available on Etsy at the Star Rug Company. Mushrooms are a cute touch because they're also pretty benign, aren't they, Ryan? They're not like scary. It's not like whisker off a, witch's wart, or like finger of an elf, or hoof of a unicorn. It's like, it's a mushroom, right? Nobody died for this ingredient. So in that way, it's kind of, yeah, it's friendly. It's more friendly. Huge shout out to Jane for helping me find so many of these images. I just put some funny ones in here for us to kind of flip through, so we had a nice big gallery for tonight. This is another one of these postcards that you could pull from if you wanted to. I'm going to give you some info on the broom a little bit later in the episode, but I like this idea of substituting for the witch a jack-o'-lantern's head. So we're already crossing two of the motifs that we've talked about, using that jack-o'-lantern head that represents like stealing fire, stealing this essential quality of life from the darkest place and bringing it to earth. It's a victory. So I just thought this was a cool and very easy pattern to work, right? I thought that was a nice one. That was one I put into the shop. Now, what I want to come to here is, and this is really, my paperwork being out of order is a real problem. This is an image of, a celebration, a hallowed celebrations. This is a Wikipedia image. This came from I feel like I missed a slide. Hang on one second. Nope, I'm going to have to go back for it. Wait a minute, I'm just checking. Yeah, I'm going a little bit out of order, but that's okay. This is obviously a painting. This comes from a website called gathervictoria.com. And it was a 2006 entry from right before Halloween on October 29th. And it was called Soul Cakes for an Old-Fashioned All Hallows Eve. And this is an example of a 19th century celebration on All Hallows Eve. I thought this might appeal to some of you who are also cooks, rather bakers. And the blog says, I've been researching old world recipes in search of Halloween food inspiration. And these little sweet barmbrack soul cakes, that's what they're called, S-O-U-L, although in the olden days they had an E at the end of soul. Soul cakes are the result. And while we may think of all things pumpkin when it comes to Halloween, originally it was magical cakes, berries, and nuts, especially hazelnut, that played starring roles in the feasts of Hallowtide, October 29th, November 1st, and November 2nd. And I'm going on to read from this fantastic blog that said, bringing pagan and Christian faith traditions, these foods were associated with both Samhain and All Souls Day. So you would have the special All Souls cake on both of these times. A Christian festival dating to 800 AD, both had similarities. According to this source, the dead were honored, skeletons were decorated, kind of like the Day of the Dead in South America. Lit candles were carried in processions. Bonfires burned to ward off evil spirits. Carnival-like costumes were donned. And of course, there was plenty of cake, because people are going to want to eat during these ceremonies. It's a new thing, the giving out candy, right? The trick and the treat. That's a new thing. The celebrations of Hallowtide and going hundreds of years back, not 50 years back, 70 now, very different types of celebrations that were meant for the whole family. There are lots of soul cake recipes online. You should check them out. Most of them feature round soul cakes that are made from berries, fruits, and nuts. And it's a custom that's reminiscent of modern-day trick-or-treating, according to the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. People went from house to house singing and asking for a soul cake. I guess a soul represents like a soul of a body that's passed, right? For each cake received, a prayer was said for the dead, and today soul cakes are still part of the Catholic cuisine, baked in celebration of All Hallows Eve. And on this website that again is called Gather Victoria, look up soul cakes, Gather Victoria, you will find a nice recipe for the soul cakes. Part of it was, and this goes back to like Christmas cakes and Christmas puddings in England, a penny in the cake meant that you were going to be rich. Right, so you get your fortune in the cake too. That's something that we haven't talked about yet. With the worlds being so close together on All Hallows Eve, the idea was that it was a perfect time for you to get your fortune. This was something that was very serious, right? This was not a joke. This was not a whimsy like getting a fortune cookie. This was like dead serious. You would want a good fortune or you would be seriously alarmed. If you got a penny, it meant that you were going to be rich. If you got a pea, like a pea from a pod, it meant the future was filled with health. If you got a ring, it meant that you were a bride to be. If you got a thimble, it would mean that you would never marry. You would be like an old maid. And a piece of cloth indicated someone who would be poor. I mean, how awful would you get the piece of cloth in your soul cake? I mean, that for so many reasons is gross and disappointing, to say the least, right? So disappointing. What was I just going to say? Oh, gosh, I just lost my train of thought completely. Oh, I was just going to say something to research if you're interested in this line of conversation. I won't hit it too hard. Um, there's a giant moth that's desperately trying to get in. It is really like Halloweeny. One of the things to research that's interesting is the idea of the origins of trick-or-treating, because trick-or-treating goes back to like an ancient story about this man who, I want to say like on a bet or on a dare, that kind of a thing, ended up leaving a party, going, like all of these stories are crazy, these old stories, right? It's not a normal story I'm about to tell you. He ends up going out to the woods where he finds a corpse that had been hanged. And he put something around the neck of the corpse. I think that was what he was meant to do for like a dare. But the corpse woke up. And the corpse said, "Water." And this man, as you would, took the corpse down from the noose and put the corpse over his shoulder and started to walk from house to house in the village in search of water. So he gets to the first house. I can't remember what the problems were. It's kind of like the three bears, right? He goes to three houses, and there's a different problem at the first two houses. One of them is like flooded with water, so he can't make it to the door, which is kind of ironic because he's looking for water. And the first house, I can't remember what the problem was, but there was no water. Maybe nobody was home, kind of a thing, but it was at the third house that they got the water. So the corpse revives, drinks the water, then kills all the members of the family, and the man takes him back to the woods, returns him to the noose, where he somehow is able to put his neck back into the rope, and then goes back and means to retrieve his bet, but finds that all of his friends are gone. This is a little bit of a detour. And somehow, I forget what kind of an entity speaks to him, but tells him he has seen the future and he needs to do A, B, and C if he expects to live through the future years and for civilization to live. One of these epic type stories, right? So that's where the idea of trick-or-treating comes from, going from house to house in search of something that you want. In this case, not water, but soul cakes, and then eventually candy, right? So it will change. This is the snowball quality of the holiday, isn't it? It doesn't stay the same as the Celtic roots. Every generation, we change it a little bit. We add our storytelling or book that's popular, something about Harry Potter, something new. We add that layer to the holiday that we already know. And you can be sure, I know that when my kids are older and when they have kids, God willing, that they will have a completely different Halloween than I had. It'll be very different than walking up Windsor Drive with the Scotty dog, Candace, that we had, and my dad pulling the wagon with me and my sister in it with homemade costumes. It'll be very different than that because that's what holidays are. They're works in progress, aren't they? So this is just, I thought, a cool image to bring us to that place of celebration. So returning to the idea of the witch, this card is called Charms of the Witching Hour. And this is interesting for me because part of the woven story, yeah, it is. It's a crazy story, Mom, about the corpse. Absolutely crazy, but but meaningful and symbolic in so many different ways. And of course, we lost a lot of the symbolism over the years because all of these, they might relate to other stories that have fallen by the wayside that are not familiar anymore, just like the jack-o'-lantern being on fire that was stolen from the depths of hell. So in this postcard, we see the phrase Charms of the Witching Hour, which is interesting. This is another great card. This is very different for an image because we've got a white cat this time. Maybe it's for contrast. I don't know why. We do have the pumpkin face, a laughing, very jolly, right? Another joyful Halloween. But in this case, she seems to be riding on a broomstick that is more like a hobby horse head of a rabbit. Now that's very different because I have never seen a rabbit used in imagery of Halloween, old or new. It is super colorful, Susie. This is a great one. This is a great one to do. We're going to get to that hat because if you notice in every image, the hat is very different. In some images, the witch is looking more like a wizard. And that is giving her a different degree of power, right? She's not just a woman of the countryside who's familiar with herbs and might be able to help you with a toothache. She's taking on a quality more like a wizard at this point. So she's being elevated in a way that is quite different, right? So this is the direction that Halloween is moving in, and this is the direction that the witch character is evolving into. Whereas originally, if you do dyeing or you do anything with canning, you would be the equivalent of a witch, right? Like, again, there would be no negative association with that. It just meant that you knew more things about the natural world than the average person, and you might be able to help people with your knowledge. But this is the witch that's pushing it into a slightly different direction. Um, kind of a party witch, but there's a lot of contrasts and a lot of incongruities here. And I think the reason is that at the beginning of the 20th century, we really weren't. It wasn't a widespread celebration of the holiday, and we weren't trick or treating. Families, particularly Christian families, ironically, might be celebrating Halloween with the soul cakes and different traditions that had lasted through the years that had attached to the Christian calendar, right? And so did Halloween. But we are moving away from it in this image. We're looking at two very different familiars, a rabbit and a white cat. So it just goes to show, if you are looking at Halloween imagery, you don't have to really stick to the truly, basic characters of the black cat, the witch in black. You can really branch out, because the further back you go, the more variety we see in Halloween imagery. And I also share and love this pumpkin moon. It's like the harvest moon, so big coming down. And it's so joyful, because it's like having a moon like this with the pumpkin face means that people can tend to the crops late at night. That's a gift, right? So it's a cool symbol in the middle of what has really changed as a holiday. This is the same kind of witch we were just talking about. This is more of the wizard type witch, right? This is the witch that you should be maybe a little more suspicious of. Again, many of these images I put for sale if you don't like doing transferring yourself. This is one of them, because I love the idea of this oversized orange cauldron, the jack-o'-lantern holding the fire. It's one of the things that's leaned up against the cauldron, heating the cauldron. The image of the witch in her garb, right? Her kind of scrawny arms. She's very focused. She's got that dunce cap on. We're coming to that, giving her sort of mystical powers. She's got the skull. She's got a skull on her costume, so that hints of something darker, right? She's got the black cat familiar. She's using a beaker, which is kind of a measure. It's a little bit different than like a pinch of this and a dash of that. It's like this is scientific, what she's got going on here. But in terms of being an Art Deco masterpiece, this is an Art Deco masterpiece. It does have a bit of a scary flavor of Halloween. It's a little different than the other images that we've seen. I pulled up this text that I thought was really cool too. What we now think of as Halloween, a holiday on which the veil, we said this, between the living and the dead supposedly lifts, celebrated with costumes, treats, etc., etc. It starts to take shape in the late 1800s. Trick-or-treating begins in the 1920s, but we said this earlier, but really takes off in the 1950s. Before trick-or-treating parties, there were the things to do on Halloween. These parties were more for adults than children. I have lots of books on this. Maybe I'll look at them and take them out. I have lots of books on this. Grown-up parties where like adults were getting together in dating situations, getting to know each other. It wasn't really couples. It was like older, kids and young adults. But many fortune-telling games were played at these kinds of parties. And that's where the witch comes in, because she is the best fortune teller. So the idea of the witch, and I know I'm not supposed to use this word, but gypsy character, traditionally as stereotypes, they are interlinked at a certain point in the 20th century, right? They become confused. They are completely different. But we start to think of the witch as someone with exceptional powers to tell fortunes and to tell the future. Now, fortune-telling games on Halloween go back to super early America. You get accounts in the 1600s of girls sitting around on this special night, the cross-quarter night, right, Halloween and Valentine's Day, doing special games of fortune to predict their future, always to do with boys, right? Always to do with boys. And this is a quote from Anna Margaret Price in the Ladies' Home Journal, 1897, and the article was called Merry Halloween Games, right? Crossing over the celebrations of Christmas with the idea of Halloween. Merry Halloween Games. The quote goes, "Great amusement may be had by placing 2 hickory nuts on the hearth in front of the open fire. One is supposed to represent the girl who places it there, and the other her yet undeclared but mentally chosen lover. Should the nuts burn brightly, a happy marriage will result. Should the nut named after the man jump toward the nut named after the girl, she may expect a proposal before the next new moon. Can you imagine if you were a girl living at this time and you took these kinds of magazine articles as gospel? How excited you would have gone out of your mind if that nut went near your nut. I mean, you would have lost your mind, right? It would be so exciting. I love thinking about things like that. The witches and the black cat decorations. Oh, me too. This has all of those tropes that we will see later in the 20th century. This is just very early imagery still. And then we see a lot of cards like this, more early imagery. These early greetings tell us a lot about the way the holiday is evolving. This is a little bit out of focus because it's a low quality shot. Halloween greetings. May this witch with magic book bring heaps of luck to you. On this night of Halloween, a friendly wish that's true. So now we're seeing with clues like this that the witch is actually a character who people are looking to for their fortune. They want the witch to bring luck. So the witch is like a positive character. It's not a dark character. It's definitely not the mischievous witch. You want the witch to give you a good fortune, a good report for the future. So here she is looking through her books. It looks a bit studious and scientific. It looks like there's some rhyme or reason here. She seems to have this magical, mystical knowledge that nobody else has. And if she gives you your fortune and it's positive, you're gonna have a good night. You're gonna go to sleep quite happy, right? Now, here's a neat card that represents these cross-quarter days together, both Valentine's Day and Halloween. So these are at opposite ends of the calendar, at opposite ends of the seasonal. I'm just going to take a quick sip. I just love this one because somehow Valentine's Day, in representing rebirth and growth and fertility and all that, is grounded on the earth, whereas the witch's face is on the moon, right? So she's a bit more mystical. She's a bit more far off. It's a bit more abstract. But we are getting some weird crossovers, like we've got an owl that looks more like a bat than an owl. There is a bat also in the distance. But it's interesting to see, and I think it would be extremely desirable. I don't know if this postcard is for sale, but in terms of collector's value, I would think an image like this would be a super collectible image because it is representing those two sort of polar opposites on the calendar. And for a lot of people, I think that's really an interesting part of the story, is that how can these two holidays that are so different be linked? Well, they are completely linked. Interesting. Now, I'm going to show you some other images that bring us to a different conversation, and I'm going to be focusing on the broom. Now, this is going to get a little bit, I'm going to say erotic, for lack of a better word. So stick with me. If you don't like this stuff, it might be a good time for a bathroom break. Dave says, I remember bobbing for apples. Not very sanitary. That is so funny. Has anybody read the Agatha Christie book called Halloween Party? I'm not doing a spoiler alert, but in the first scene, all these kids are at a Halloween party, and this is so awful. But one of the kids' head is pushed under, and she's drowned that way, and that's the beginning of one of the excellent Agatha. I love all the Agatha Christies. That's a really good one. But yeah, Halloween Party, and it does have that apostrophe between the E's. That is an exceptionally good mystery for this time of year. So just let's look at this card first, because this is really sort of the ominous, suspicious kind of a witch. This is like a witch that attracts mice, like the Pied Piper. Like she has this danger about her, right? She's looking at us directly in the eye. This is a very threatening witch. The witch gets all the news tonight. The man in the moon tells all. My secret he will tell, I know. Your fortune, your true love will show. So this is kind of a romantic sentiment, but I mean, you do not want this person being the person who gives you your fortune, right? It doesn't look like it would be good news, but interesting costume, very Puritan costume. And then the man in the moon is behind her. It's funny how her hat is like splitting the man. She's standing in front of the man in the moon, kind of cock blocking the man in the moon. So interesting symbolism happening here. But let's look at another image from this period that features a witch with a broomstick. This one is a bit more dynamic. There's like a keyhole in the background, has a bit of a steampunk quality. I love this one. This is one of the ones that I put on my site because this is one that I want to do. We're still looking at that conical dunce cap that is more like a wizard crossover cap. But the red dress and the sage green shawl, right? These are more natural colors, more earthy colors. They look like they could be home dyed. Really aggressive broom posture. It's kind of interesting because the keyhole also kind of looks like a sundial or a clock. And then on the periphery, besides the very animated cat and the moon, there's lots of ghoulish faces. So we are making the crossover here, two scary things, right? We are well past like the pre 1000 AD, in the centuries where we don't think about hell and the devil as prospects, right? We are well into the time that Halloween has been Christianized as a holiday and as part of the Christian calendar. And at that point, because it's part of the Christian calendar, we are looking at devil, goblins, ghoulish figures. We are looking at a struggle of good versus evil, right? Not so much death. It's not about death and the end of death and facing death. We come to more of a good versus evil confrontation the further along this holiday gets. So we're looking at a witch who's representing that kind of a dynamic. Oops, that is not supposed to be there. Let me come back here for a minute. Let me come back to you because we've seen a lot of images tonight that have broomsticks because a witch is often riding on a broomstick. And I'm going to tell you why. This was a hard thing to research, but thankfully this magazine is out right now at like all bookstores. So if you're interested in this, this is interesting. Susie says like going through a portal because of it is like that, isn't it? And doesn't that, I'm going to come back to that image, doesn't that give you some great ideas for composition? This is an extraordinary composition because it's split diagonally. It's a great frame. It's a great frame within a frame. And all of these weird faces. I reference this movie a lot, but have you seen the Albert Finney Christmas Carol, like the musical version? It is like the best. And that scene where Albert Finney goes out into the night and flies through the sky with a ghost, I guess, of Christmas past, I think it is. And all of these ghouls are in the sky flying toward him. If you saw that, you would not have forgotten that scene. That is deeply disturbing and super fantastic. But it reminds me of that a lot, that image. This magazine is incredible. $15 for a magazine? Are you kidding me? It is what it is. It's a great magazine. History Channel puts out lots of different subjects. Ghosts is out there too, but I got witches for tonight. And it all kinds of articles, new and old. I'm not that interested in like the contemporary like Wiccan spin on witches. I think that's apples and oranges. That's definitely not what we're talking about tonight. This has a lot of great history and history on specific witches like Mother Shipton. We'll maybe come to this stuff later in the month, but I'm going to read you this excerpt that again is a little bit edgy. So if you don't like things that are edgy, if you're more Puritan than I am, you might not like this clip, but it was written by History Magazine, not me. And it talks about witchcraft lore, and the subject is broomsticks. By the way, I am drinking Midnight Snack. This is very nice. I don't know what kind of a beer this is. You see it's got some of the images that we're talking about here. I know you recognize the image of going into the refrigerator at midnight and standing up while you're eating all kinds of garbage, right? You recognize that one, right? We all recognize that one. This is really good. It says, oh, stout. I love stout. Listen to this. Stout with cheesecake, vanilla beans, cocoa nibs, and pumpkin spices. Oh, man, that makes me crazy. That makes me want to come out punching. Witchcraft lore, broomsticks. The word witch commonly brings to mind the image of a person wearing a pointy hat and cape perched on a broomstick as they fly across a full moon. As early as the 11th century, witches had been thought to have the ability to fly. However, the broomstick appears later, along with two other elements of witchcraft, potions and female sexuality. So-called witches made potions from a variety of plants, some of which had hallucinogenic properties. Hallucinogenic, I struggle with that word, never did that stuff. Properties. These concoctions could be absorbed through the glands in between the legs. Witches were believed to smear their concoctions on wooden shafts. I told you this was getting edgy. The witches would then mount the shafts, and the hallucinogenic compounds would bring on erratic behavior. Not erotic, erratic behavior. Although this might seem far-fetched, it is based on the evidence presented at a trial of an accused witch called Alice Keitler in Ireland in the 1300s. According to investigators, quote, in rifling the closet of the lady, they found a pipe of ointment wherewith she greased a staff, upon which she ambled and galloped through thick and thin, end quote. In the 15th century, theologian Jordanes or Bergamo reported that the witches confessed that on certain days or nights they anoint a staff and ride on it to the appointed place, or anoint themselves under the arms and, quote, in other hairy places. End of segment. So, and this is another vintage image that I pulled up. That's another old postcard that they're showing you there. So that is the origin. That is a bit more erotic than you thought, right? And me too, for sure. That is right on the edge of what we can do on cocktail time. But I thought it was interesting because the idea of using a stick to fly, it doesn't really support itself, right? People are not historically that stupid or particularly imaginative. But the idea of using it to apply an ointment, I think we're all thinking of something else. I'm going to leave it at that. Interesting. I feel I need to sanitize my brooms. Of course. Well, now we know the origin of the brooms. Oh man, I'm telling you, all of these things go so deep, right? It's never what you thought it was going to be about. It's such a shakeup. The further down the rabbit hole you go, the more shook up you get. I'm telling you. Now, this is in the wrong place. But come on, we have looked at this rug recently on Coffee Time. Do you remember this? It was hooked. I couldn't find it. I usually delete my old episodes, not my old episodes, the video, but the old content, like the photos, because otherwise my computer would just barf out, it's too much. So I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it online. I looked under every normal thing you could find. But do you remember us seeing this on a past Coffee Time episode not even that long ago? I feel like it was, Karen, was it Sauter Village? I feel like it was Sauter Village. I really do. It was such a cute image, and it must be at Cushing, although I didn't see this pattern on Cushing when I looked at their website. I looked under their Halloween stuff. I didn't see it. It might be there. This isn't one that I put into Ribbon Candy Hooking because I just wasn't sure, and I don't really want to mess with Cushing. But, this is another kind of hat tip to the idea of the gourd. I know we talked about the lemon wheels, right? And there's a gourd chauffeur driving the witch and her familiar, like through this like very Halloween terrain. It looks almost like Transylvania. Interesting, right? Super interesting. But if you remember this image, or you happen to, by any stretch of the imagination, remember who did it, like who hooked it, I would love to get a photo of that again for this month. It is totally off my computer. I don't remember ever seeing. We definitely did, because I remember saying, what are those, like grapefruits or tangerines? And somebody said lemons, and I said, oh, of course they're lemons. It's obvious that they're lemons. And it wasn't that long ago. I'm really aggravated that I forgot, but that is one that I would like to get a hold of if you could find. This is another rather benign, very cute postcard. Depicts a witch as kind of a wizard with magical powers. She's got her broomstick, but she's not riding on it. Now riding on a broomstick is more like a metaphor for something much dirtier, isn't it? She's sitting on the pumpkin, the jack-o'-lantern that's lit with fire. She's got a bunch of motifs around her that make a lot of sense. I went through, what is this, the early symbols? Okay, so let's talk about the hat. I found this great, now this is another laced up hat. It's a conical hat. It reminds us of the no, they're zucchinis. Okay, wait a minute. No, they're zucchinis. I have to respond to that. Oh my gosh, I think they are zucchinis. I think you're right. Why would they be lemons, right? Because this is an all gourd holiday. Thank you. We were saying they were lemons, but I think you must be right. It makes way more sense if they're zucchinis. And has anybody ever said that sentence before? We say the craziest things on this show, right? So let's talk about the witch's hat now, because this is another part of the witch motif that is really peculiar. So I found this great blog called, and again, this is a very puritanical costume, isn't it? This is what, you know, what we perceive pilgrims as wearing, very somber clothes, very oversized collar. They didn't do the things with the buckles and the shoes and the buckles on the hats, but it is kind of that dour look, right? They were coming from Leiden in the Netherlands and then different parts of England. It is this kind of costume that we're seeing on the witch. The hat is out of place. So I found this great website that's called Worthwich or Worthich, WORTHWICH.com backslash classroom backslash witch's hat. And it said, as nearly all symbols in history, the tall conical hat has undergone many iterations of meaning and through the centuries was used to denote wisdom, liberty, otherness, deception, and shame. We should have left it at otherness, right? Because deception and shame, well, shame is the dunce cap, right? That certainly is the dunce cap. One of the earliest examples of this hat was found in a well-preserved mummy's discovery in the desert of western China, dating to 4,000 years ago. I have an image of this. Known as the Witches of Sibushi. I'm going to show you the actual image of this photograph. There were a collection of bodies found in China from 4,000 years ago dressed like this. This is one of the bodies. Is this not outrageous? I mean, this is crazy. This looks like our modern version of a witch. This is one of the witches of Subeshi, Subeshi. These ancients were preserved with black felt conical hats, thought to have been used in relation to falconry, as one mummy was also found wearing a thick leather glove on one hand, perhaps to land a bird of prey. The hats are now most often associated with witches in the holiday of Halloween or Samhain. While many theories abound as to the origins of these hats, it is clear they aimed to set the wearer apart and make them stand out for one reason or another. In other words, this is not normal. Like, this is not fashion, is it? This is extraordinary. You look at somebody like this, what is the most prominent thing you see? This crazy conical hat, right? Tall conical hats embellished with a star or moon symbol were worn by priests in the Bronze Age to denote their special ability to read the stars. Of course. Doesn't that make incredible sense? Of course it does. These early astronomers were thought to have magic powers and divinatory ability as they would use their skills to predict the weather. So they were evolving an understanding of the constellations, the stars. They were creating stories that went along with the stars. Those stories are very linked. The story of Taurus, very linked to Halloween. But yeah, they were developing an actual knowledge of science, but it was so magical to the ordinary person that it was considered like magic, right? Of course it was. Everything that's the computer's magic to me, right? You know I don't know how to use that. I can hardly use my phone. Karen says, this has to be a perch. Interesting. Interesting, isn't it? So that's the history of the hat, right? That's as far as we can go. We know those two associations are there. There's that Asian association, and then there's that Bronze Age European association. Interesting. What we know is that when people wear this hat, they are meant to stand out. And that makes a lot of sense because you really can't avoid standing out if you have a witch's hat on. So I just put in a few more images that I thought were interesting that included some of the things that we were talking about. Not just riding on a broomstick, right, which does have those, now that we know, kind of erotic overtones or undertones. Did you get what I did there? So in this case, the witches are, like one of them is in full riding regalia, like she's going on a fox hunt, but she's riding on the back of an owl. We've got two kind of gnome clown characters, three riding on bats. So animals, I think, Karen, I think you're right. I think these are animals of the night, right? Because this is a Halloween morning, but these are all animals of the night. And right, certainly Halloween isn't as a holiday that's built on the night. When the day turns into evening and these two worlds are very close together. And again, we have this image of the moon as a pumpkin. I think that's so cool. It's something that we see early on. We're seeing it in the late 19th century, according to the postcards we're looking at tonight. We're doing research as we're sitting here, and you're all contributing to the thread and helping with evolving our ideas here, putting things together that make sense. This is how you learn. This is how research is done, right? Live in person with all of our collective knowledge, looking at these images and going, well, I think this is it. And I think Karen has a great point. I think probably the only reason the bat might have been chosen is because it's like a bird. It's a creature of the sky, but it only comes out at night. That no vampire undertones or overtones. I think that is the thing. This is a weird kind of between the worlds thing, though, isn't it? Because it's like we have the earth in this one and we have the moon in this one. And the moon is the pumpkin. So we've got really between the worlds, and all of these characters are floating in there. I think this is one I put on ribbon candy hooking because I want to do this one too. If you do any of these, whether you order them from me or you trace them yourselves, please let me know. Absolutely, Lisa. This is so Mother Goose. It's crazy. That central figure is super Mother Goose. Of course, Mother Goose wears a witch's hat. I'm going to come to that in a minute. That's really interesting. I think Mother Goose wears a witch's hat because Hans Christian Andersen's illustrations are also, actually, I have to rethink that because Mother Goose, I think, is late 1700s, early 1800s. Hans Christian Andersen is later. So maybe Hans Christian Andersen, I just have to research this before I forget what I'm thinking. I think it's the other way around. Yeah, because, Hans Christian Andersen is definitely 19th century, right? So interesting because this is a Hans Christian Andersen illustration. That also looks like Mother Goose. I'm sure Mother Goose came sooner because Mother Goose is buried on the Freedom Trail in Boston, I think it's called the Old King's Burial Ground behind Faneuil Hall. And her husband is like Isaiah Goose, right? So I forget what her first name is, but she is a mother. She's a mother and she's grandmother. But she's mostly an author, and all of the original copies of Mother Goose went missing, so that's why it's one of the most collectible, sought-after things in the world. But that would have come earlier. This is interesting. Now it's got me thinking, going down the crazy rabbit hole while I'm live, because I'm looking at this Hans Christian Andersen illustration, and it's depicting the Snow Queen, a witch that wields her own tool of sorcery. And in this case, if you know this Hans Christian Andersen story, it's a golden crumb, right? So anything can be, am I out of focus? Anything can be a tool of sorcery, but she's got a golden crumb that she runs through the main character Gerda's hair. That's what's happening in this illustration to make her forget about her friend Kai. Strange. That's part of this history magazine. So she's running the crumb through her hair. A tool of sorcery can be as benign as a breadcrumb, right? Breadcrumbs are used a lot in fairy tales. The moon looks like a tad nervous, does he? He does. That is a bit of a nervous smile. That is a bit of a hysterical type smile, isn't it? Oh, man. Some of these images are just too much. Here's another one that I think is interesting. They're using, the witch is up there again on this leathery bat. The sky is filled with bats, and they all seem to be trailing like a false pumpkin, right? It looks like it's a paper pumpkin or something, almost like an advertisement in the sky behind a blimp. The witches fly high in their delight, for this, is Halloween night. So this is their night, right? And she is wearing the witch's hat. She is wearing the conical hat. The idea of witches as fortune tellers is something that evolves late in the game for the holiday. I'm going to have to watch the show just to take it all. I'm glad there's that much information, Stephanie. I always love it. I love it when there's plenty of information. Back to this idea of fortune-telling games, because this is a huge part of Halloween that we have lost. If you don't like Halloween and you want to celebrate in a certain way, bring it back as a fortune-telling day. That's super fun. That's absolutely historical. It's rooted in history. If you don't like the goblins and the witches and all the macabre side of the holiday, bring it back as a fortune-telling party. That's super fun. What I was going to say before, Dave, is the bobbing for apples thing. In the Netherlands, they have a variation on the bobbing for apples. Theirs probably came earlier. You tie a bunch of donuts or like fried dough to strings, and then you try to bite it off the string, and it turns while you're trying to bite it. So equally gross, without the benefit of water kind of washing it in between people spitting on it. You're just biting into the same donut in the same place and hoping that you're the one that it doesn't spin too much and you can bite it down and get it off the string. Different variation on the same grossness. Right? It's gross to us now, but then it was just like an extra snack, wasn't it? It was just excellent. So the idea of witches as fortune tellers, I pulled some information about this because this is a huge part of early American history, and I covered this a lot when I was a tour guide because I love early American history is my sweet spot. Revolutionary era and settlement era, my favorite time, my favorite place. So reading tea leaves was popular at Halloween parties in the late 1800s. It's a much older fortune telling tradition, but it became very popular during the Victorian period. Let me show you a painting of people reading tea leaves. Because we tend to think of these things as very sort of narrow interest things. This is widespread culture. This is what people were doing at parties. Social people, people of high classes, were doing this at parties. They're reading tea leaves. I just think it's interesting to know that. Reading tea leaves was popular at Halloween parties, at other parties too, but mostly at Halloween parties because of the closeness of the worlds. This painting was done in 1838. Reading the shapes of tea leaves at the bottom of a cup, as seen in this painting, is also supposed to reveal a girl's romantic future. The spookiest versions of husband divining games involved a girl going into a dark room. Now, this is not the tea leaves anymore. A girl going into a dark room with a lit candle to hopefully see shadows of her future husband beside her in a mirror. That is kind of spooky. In her article, Miss Price describes another game that seems like and this is all from a website called NewYorkNYHistory.org. Miss Price describes another game that seems like a major health hazard to modern minds. She wrote, lead melted in large iron spoons may be dropped in the water, and fortunes told from shapes which it assumes. Unbeknownst to the revelers at the time, accidentally eating this lead could have led to brain damage. Maybe it looks like something else. Hope I'm still live. The screen just flashed. Karen says reading tea leaves was a big deal in the White House in the late 1800s. Oh, how interesting is that? That really legitimizes it, doesn't it? That is so cool. It looks like I'm live. Looks like I went offline. Let me know if you're still there. That makes me very nervous. We did our lead drops. That's right, Mom. In water on New Year's 1 year at Germany. Yep, we love the lead drops. I'm sure we have lead this year as well. I kept our lead drops too. They made such wacky shapes. You're still there. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm amazed that this middleman program, which is called Streamlabs, could handle that kind of a thing. Because we know from experience it doesn't always. Murphy, don't be hearing me. Another game from the past that seems more fraught with fun, more fraught than fun, this is awful, was a child's game of trying to pick up pennies from a plate of flour using only your teeth. This is a different Halloween game. Lest you think that choking is only a modern concern, about this game in 1944, the New York Times had an article that reported that one youngster, in playing this game on Halloween, inhaled, while competing in the flour face to face, a penny, and it was hastily extricated from a Children's Aid Society Halloween party on the Lower East Side. So it made the news. It made the New York Times, a child inhaling this penny, playing this Halloween fortune game. There was a blip. Yeah. So interesting. So I'm just going to see through this thought of fortune telling and look at some of this imagery. This might speak to you. This is a game. This is a board game from 1901. Now, this is a possible design for you without a doubt. It's busy, but isn't it cool? This game is called Hand of Fate. It was a fortune-telling game, and the reason this game was produced was because on Halloween, so many people were playing fortune-telling games. Of course, you're going to produce a board game. You can make some money doing it, right? You can really kind of streamline and standardize the kind of fortune-telling that you do. I'm not getting into the idea of the Ouija board here. I might do that later in October. This is definitely a more child-oriented version of a fortune-telling game for Halloween, right? So in this spooky 1901 game, a magnetic spinner allows you to play 3 versions of the game. In one, the hand of fate chooses answers for you. This sounds like a Ouija board, doesn't it? In another, your fortune is revealed according to your birthday. And in another, true or false questions are posed and answers are determined by landing on odd or even numbers around the board. So, hey, if you were growing up in 1901, can you imagine? I mean, think of somebody in your family who was a child in 1901. Do you think that they went to a party on Halloween and this game was brought out all new and fresh, not faded, not browned and tanned like this, but all new and fresh? And can you imagine those kids standing around the table and going out of their minds, like waiting for their chance to use this magnetic spinner and get their fortune? I mean, just so much fun, so much fun, and so much great imagery. This is another image that I loved. I think I put this one online. I couldn't resist it. Many other fortune-telling games involved apples. Apples were sometimes hung from the ceiling by string, so this goes back to the Dutch tradition, and plucked with teeth, just like the donuts I was just telling you about. The color of the chosen apple could mean future wealth, love, or luck. Apples were tossed at a target for luck, and apple seeds were used to tell fortunes in other games. Now, of course, that makes sense because you do pick apples in the season, right? If you live in a part of the country where there's tons of farms that offer apple picking right now, this is the time for that. Apples were tossed at a target, we said that. It makes sense that apples were such popular Halloween game components, considering they're seasonal and plentiful in October, much like another favorite Halloween food, the pumpkin. So I put this in because I'm going to go in a future episode. It might be, I might do it on Monday for coffee time. I want to go more into the subject of another Halloween subject, right? This is the month of Halloween. We're getting into the thick of it now. Going to be another heavy sort of history-based coffee time on Monday. I want to talk about some of the so-called witches through history, not persecuted witches, but witches that were truly believed up to the 20th century and through the 20th century of having fortune-telling powers. One of those witches was a famous, I think, English character. Maybe she was German, but she actually had her own set of tarot cards. They were altered, but she was very, very famous. She told the fortune of Josephine, of Napoleon and Josephine, Marat, like famous French figures of that day. Maybe she was French, actually. That would make more sense. But she was believed to have very specific fortune-telling ability with a deck of cards, nothing else, just the deck of cards. So whereas some witches, their forte is like tea leaves, some witches, their forte is cards. So this is something that will evolve a little bit later, but I thought that this was interesting. Because this image is really a hat tip to fortune telling with cards. Now, the word tarot comes to mind, right? That's not exactly what I want to do in this episode, but it might be something that we go into a little bit, because certainly looking at decks of tarot cards for designing Halloween rugs, making Halloween compositions, that's a good match. Now, we don't have to go full blast pagan if that is not your thing. There are so many decks of tarot cards out there with all different themes, and one thing they usually have in common is the art is phenomenal. This piece just really speaks to me. I'm not a huge fan of like the witch head above the child's head. I think if I were to do this design, which I hope to do, I think I would take that part out. But I do like the wise owl lending some legitimacy to the act of performing a fortune telling whatever with cards, right? Also using the little oil lamp, borrowing from like Eastern culture and lore. Interesting, isn't it? The mixture of symbols on this particular card, the tarot card, the hooker, tarot card, the hooker. You know, wouldn't it be cool to put together a deck of cards? I once did this thing with Tracy Willis. She's still a friend of mine online, but I did mostly studio art back then, and I was doing stuff for Somerset magazine, like in every issue, and writing for them and stuff. And she did a deck of cards that was not quilting. They couldn't have been quilting. They were just like art cards. Some of them were quilted. Mine wasn't. I remember it. She gave me one of the suits. It was like the Jack or the Queen or something. I was so happy that I had one of the face cards because I figured it was a real special one. Is there a deck of rug hooking cards? Does anybody know? Because that would be a cool thing to put together. I bet that's something we could manufacture that would be a lot of fun. Whether they're tarot or not, I just wonder if there exists a deck of rug hooking cards, because that could be super fun. Barbara says, I see the woman's head as the Earth Mother. You know, I like that much more, Barbara. I like that much more. I see that now that you say that with like the flowering behind her. I like that much more. Yet, you know what, she doesn't, other than having long hair, she doesn't have witch qualities, does she? She is, and with the brown background and the green leaves and the flowering, she does look tied to the earth. I like that you said that. I like that you said that. It does make for a more complicated pattern, but I think the symbolism is fantastic. This would be a rug that you would have to do enormous, right? Because if you look at the bottom with the suits of cards, I mean, this would have to be done quite large. I still would love to do it. I think I would do the design a little bit differently. I would alter it I would definitely take out the word Halloween. I love the idea too, Susie. Let's evolve it, regardless if there has been one. If there has been one, I've never seen it. Might be something that we want to think about, right? Now, this is interesting. I'm getting kind of to the end of the show here, and I'm moving into, oh, wait a minute. Nope, never mind. I did that. I'm moving into like some other subjects that are little offshoots from witching. Karen says the hooker was one. Oh my gosh, I see what you mean, like the tarot card of the hooker. Oh, oh, that is amazing. Oh, uh-oh, that is amazing. Oh, I love that idea. I love that. Shall we do that? Shall we just do that? Maybe we'll put up like maybe we'll organize it. How many cards are in a tarot deck that has not been altered? Does anybody know? You know what I love about tarot decks? The archetypes. And in terms of storytelling, all we use are archetypes. They've all been established. They were established hundreds of years ago. We can't come up with anything new under the sun. And so it's interesting to tap into all of those subjects that appear in the tarot card. I have a tarot deck that I got recently that is the kawaii, right? Like the cute, like Japanese characters. I also have I have a self-help tarot deck that I only use. I haven't read the book, but it seems very cool. Some of this stuff speaks to me. Some of it says this is insane, but some of it says, ooh, you needed to hear that at that moment. So it's funny how whatever you're looking at sometimes can speak to you, and certainly a tarot deck. 56 or 78. I'm kind of loving this idea. This could really be something, couldn't it? And I bet we could have this as, well, we could do it as a challenge. We could assign, like, we could put up the thing and it could be random. And we could figure out what the different cards would be. Let's evolve this idea. I think this is a great idea. Let's settle this before the end of October and let's work on it through the winter. It'd be a great thing to bring forward and to be able to put up. Maybe I can produce some copies of it and then we can put them up for sale. It'd be super limited, but it could be a lot of fun. Those could be great inspiration cards. And maybe I could write like a rug hooking article about it. Maybe one of you wants to write a rug hooking magazine article about it or ATHA article about it. I don't need to be the queen bee. If someone else wants to do it, that's great for me. But that would be a lot of fun. 78 cards. There's also oracle cards, Gayla. Oh, I don't know oracle cards. See, I have got some research to do. I think this is interesting. I like this idea because the imagery really is such visual imagery. And we seem to love, on this channel, we seem to love history and talking about symbolism. And all of these things are part of rug making too, aren't they? History and symbolism. So it would make sense that this would cross over for us in a huge way. Interesting. All right. I'm going to, I hate this term, but I'm going to circle back to that because that is an absolute, sounds good to me. Let's do it. So this is one that deviates a little bit. Halloween greeting. There was a witch, and thus she sang to the merry tune of wang, twang, twang, twing, twang. When witches were with her wizardry, what's going on here? Watch we which way you wander the while. Okay, there's some letters that have faded. When witches will with her, oh boy, this is tough, isn't it? Wizardry while. I don't know. This is a toughie. There's some letters just totally left out here. I wonder if it's supposed to be like that. That's really crazy. But anyway, I put this image up. You do pagan, Sharon. I absolutely would do too. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of fun, lots of history. Nothing evil. I love this card because it shows a witch sitting on a mushroom, playing the guitar. And it adds a sort of artistic quality to a witch. We normally see the witch working in a laboratory setting. We don't usually see the witch crossing over into the arts, which makes this card really different. I could see this really appealing to someone. You could really alter this card too, who was interested in music or art, performing arts. This is very different. I also thought it was interesting because this is kind of a Victorian era card. And you know who else is Victorian era is, what's his name? Edward Lear, who wrote The Owl and the Pussycat, right? The Owl and the Pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat. Here's an owl and a pussycat dancing kind of by the light of the silvery moon, but by the pumpkin. So this is a bit of a crossover that must have had funny kind of joke connotation to people looking at it who would certainly have been familiar with the poem The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Lear. Interesting because Edward Lear was all, I'm freestyling it right now, but Edward Lear was also the drawing teacher to Queen Victoria. So, Queen Victoria will live right through to the beginning of the 20th century, and during that time, the arts flourish, poetry flourishes, and Edward Lear is a very prominent person at that time. He writes his poem, The Owl and the Pussycat. Everybody will know this poem, right, because of his closeness to the royal family and his sort of prestige, well-earned prestige. So this is another funny crossover image. And you know what it reminded me of? This image. Now, this is a horrible picture. This is a photograph of tracing paper. I have got to update this on ribbon candy hooking. But this is a design that I have had available forever on ribbon candy hooking. And you know what I took it from? It is a postcard that I had that I have not been able to find for years. It's somewhere. But my sister knew that I loved that image of this postcard, this Halloween postcard. And she painted this for me like years ago. It's a painting. It's an oval painting. My sister did this of the postcard. I'm going to show you the postcard because I found an image of it online. Again, mine is somewhere. It's not gone forever, but I just can't find it. I just love this image. So I haven't made this as a rug yet. I want to make it as a rug. As you could see, I put into the design a border with like silhouettes of cats and moons. I would hook this big myself. I might even think about it as a floor rug for the holiday, just for the season, This is called In the Cool, Cool, Cool of the Evening. You know that song? I don't have it as a Halloween rug. It's just called In the Cool, Cool, Cool of the Evening. This is the original rug that it's based on. So I just have to brag and show you one more time. My sister's so good. She's so good. I actually like this even better. It's even softer and nicer. One of the many treasures that I have from her, I love so much. So that's one of those things that really reminded me of that pattern. I wanted to show you some stuff that I have done in ribbon candy hooking that relates to Halloween. These are all in the description of the video tonight. This is the Maud Lewis take on her cat Fluffy that I did as a Halloween pattern. That's there in the description. This is their Halloween web. This was selling like crazy this past week. This is $35. Great hit or miss pattern from an antique pattern that we were looking at last week. This is also available. Then I had some like this one. I could not find this one, but I'll find it for you. I love that postcard too, Barbara. So scary. I started this one ages ago. I have to look for it. This is this is not the color plan that I'm using at all, but that's their Halloween Sprite. This is one that I have on ribbon candy hooking that I started, and I started it right here. It's called Steampunkin, like steampunk, but Steampunkin. And I started it in apparently 2020. This is how far I got. It's a giant pattern on monk's cloth, right? But I really like it. It's kind of a cropped, weird kind of character. And this is how far I got. I dyed some tie-dye material and I started plugging it into her wings. I realized there's a lot of Halloween stuff I didn't get to because I was writing that book last year and it crushed me for time. So that's one of the things that maybe you haven't seen. Stuff like this is out on ribbon candy hooking. I have to plug my brand too because I love to make sales. It keeps me going. This is one of the Crazy Eights. This is called School Halloween. So this is more like children's kind of Halloween colors. And those are, again, available at ribbon candy hooking right now. I also found this. And I started this in, I want to say 2019. Could it have been 2020? Is there a clue on here? I packed this like crazy. I think this is also on ribbon candy hooking. I'm not completely sure. I was doing this on rug warp. And it's more like I pulled the idea from, I had like an old magic catalog from the early 20th century, maybe late 19th century. And I wrote this verse, no Halloween would be complete without the trick and trick or treat. And I just loved it. I made kind of, under here I was working on a vase where it kind of had the suggestion of two faces with these kind of tentacle-like scrolls coming out of it. And then this kind of mid-century looking character is opening up a can that I haven't done yet. I put this down for, honestly, 3 years. And all these worms come out. So I was trying to make as many worms as I could. And it had the feel of a Hutchinson piece before I knew what that was. You can see around the edge I'm putting all kinds of colorful scallops and stuff. I really liked it. I want to get back to it. It's not going to be this year. It's already crazy. So, all right. So, I forgot to do at the beginning of the episode. Let's check our calendar. We want to keep track of what day it is, or we are not going to make it, are we? We stopped at what, 11? Let's go through the rest of our days. I don't open this when I'm not with you. So let's look at our horrible jokes, and then we're going to end this episode. Let's see. Did we open 12 or, oh no, we were together on 12. We were together on 12. We've only got 2 to do, right? I only took yesterday. I don't do Thursday. Sometimes I do Thursdays, but this week I didn't because it was a holiday on Monday. And can you hear it in my throat? I'm still not 100% well. Ooh, where do ghosts go on vacation? To the Bahamas. Shame on you, whoever wrote that. I'm just kidding. There's only so many. I know, Mom, that one's been lingering forever. I'm just looking forward to some weird window that opens up like Brigadoon, that I can suddenly do some work. It's the 14th. Okay, we only have one more to open. What did the farmer say to the scarecrow? Oh, this is actually a good one. I'll keep you posted. And there's a cute little design of a scarecrow. Isn't that funny? Oh, come on. Come into focus, Scarecrow. There he is. Isn't he cute? I've got this one here, and I've got a Halloween advent calendar in the other room for myself to open. And I've got a Halloween calendar at home for the kids to open. We're blowing it out this year. We're really going full hog for Halloween. I'm going to be a scarecrow. I'm going to be a creepy scarecrow. And Jocelyn, my daughter, is going to be a pretty scarecrow. So, I knew that's the way that the dice would roll, right? That I would be creepy and she would be pretty, as she should be. She's such a pretty little thing. But yeah, we are gathering some steam as we move forward in the holiday. If you have special requests for this month, hit like everyone. Really fun. Oh, thank you. Stephanie, thank you so much. I want to cover these Halloween subjects while we can. And I have every intention of moving, we're going to do this month kind of the Halloween themes and motifs and cover this subject and hopefully enjoy it immensely. Look at more Halloween rugs. We do have a Halloween bingo this month, and we have a Halloween gallery night this month. So please send me, if you have done a Halloween rug, please send it to me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com because I really need that for our gallery night. And I will do a bingo night too. So this is our last Friday night in October that we're having a gallery night that is not bingo that we're having a cocktail night that is not bingo or gallery. So we've only got 2 more left, and that's how we're going to spend those 2. We're going to spend the rest of our coffee times and stuff pulling up different subjects that relate to Halloween rugs and Halloween design. So we're really digging in this month and this year with the holiday. I'm also going to look at the Atha magazine. I won't forget to do that. I don't want to let that slip either. But besides that, when we head out of Halloween and into November, I know we've already had, and you've celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving. I do want to stick with the holidays this year. I want to make a big deal out of them because I was so busy last year with writing the book that I feel like I missed the holidays. And I can't miss them twice. So I really want to be together and do this stuff together. Really celebrate November and harvest themes and Thanksgiving. And all of the rugs that go along with that. And then we'll get into the winter holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, all of the winter holidays. We'll do all of it together. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. Maybe make it even more festive and special, get you going on some holiday subjects and seasonal rugs, which would be a lot of fun, or quilts. Right? Karen says, I need to figure out how to make a rug illustrating my time at the Stanley Hotel for 2 nights in RM room 217. Now, you got to give me more info. What is the Stanley Hotel? Is that like the Bates Motel? The Stanley Hotel for 2 nights in room 217. I'm guessing room 217 is haunted? Or that a horrible crime happened there? That brings me to, has anyone hooked a full skeleton? That's a good question, Sharon. I have not. Kirsten, I don't know if she's still on. She has a great skeleton design. I'll ask her if she's hooked that skeleton. She's got a good full skeleton. That's a great question. I'm curious to see if anybody answers that. I'm also curious about the Stanley Hotel. Red Room. Oh my God. Okay, right. The Shining. I didn't realize that was the Stanley Hotel. I haven't watched that movie. I can't. I can't. I have so much trouble sleeping. I get so goosey and scared. But I did, I'm sure I told you this, but I did, when I had a book club right before COVID, it was the Silver Screen Book Club, and I chose, I led the book club. I chose books that had movies that went with them, and they were all mid-century. And I chose for October the oh God, one of my favorite writers, Shirley Jackson, The House on the Hill, which is one of the scariest books ever written. And the movie is very, very different. But God, is it scary? God, it's so scary. That was about as far as I could go with that. It was just terribly scary. Inspiration for The Shining. You all know that. I did not know that. The Stanley Hotel. Interesting. That is just awful. Interesting. And one of the things I wanted to ask you at the beginning of the episode is like, I do want to do, because I have a Lizzie Borden rug, and I love the story of Lizzie Borden and whether she is guilty or not of having killed both of her parents with an axe. But can you think of interesting stories for this month that are a little bit on the spooky or horror side that would be good for single episodes, right? Particularly if there's like a rug that goes with it. Even if we could spin an episode off of one rug and make that the focus of a short episode, that could be a lot of fun for the month of October. Think about that, whether you have like a special rug that really fits into that Halloween groove that we could dig into for like a shorter episode, a regular, daytime episode. I love the Lizzie Borden pattern. I'll bring her out when I do coffee time on Monday. I have not finished her, but I'm almost finished her. And I think I put the text on it that said something like, "And when she saw what she had done," because everybody knows that rhyme, right? I love that story. I've been to that house many times and I love touring it. I even did the ghost tour of it by accident because I thought it was the historical tour and it was the night tour, so I should have known it was the ghost tour. But man, it felt eerie and creepy. It didn't feel ghostly to me, but it felt very eerie and creepy. Eureka Springs, Arkansas. That's where the Stanley Hotel is, huh? The Haunting of Hill House wasn't it, Sharon? Super creepy. I'm not going to give it away, but just that scene in The Haunting of Hill House where the girl is inside the room, like her room, and she's got it all locked up and there's all kinds of craziness going on, and she is terrified because they're conducting kind of like a paranormal experiment. That's why they've like called certain people to the house because they believed them to have special powers, to communicate with the paranormal. So they're creating like a hornet's nest situation of like these people with these high powers, most likely to draw spirits, kind of thing. That's the setup. And she's in this room, and it's like the way that Shirley Jackson describes like the whatever's on the other side of the door banging on the door and pulling on the doorknob, and just sounds like the door is going to come right off the hinges, and she is scared to death. And finally the noise stops and this is just one scene out of a million in the book. I'm not doing a spoiler alert. She opens it and goes into the hall and she sees someone else in the hall, and it's just like business as usual. Like, she's like, oh my God, like she thought like the world was ending, and nobody else heard anything. So all of this noise that was like deafening, like your ears are bleeding kind of noise, nobody else heard it. And I thought, oh my God, that gives me the shivers. That's so scary that kind of crazy, like haunting situation could be so focused and personal, that someone in the next room didn't hear you having this experience. It's just so many parts of that book that were so original. I'm going to do one more and then I'm going to stop. That scene where she's walking around in the gardens where she first arrives at the house and she hasn't even gone inside yet, and she gets the sense that someone's following her, and she's walking faster and faster and faster, and she finally gets the nerve to turn around, and she turns around and it's herself. Like, doesn't that give you the horrible shivers? A lot of devices that Shirley Jackson did, being the horror queen of all time and one of Stephen King's great inspirations. She did a lot of things for the first time that were so scary. It's pure scary, though. It's not like gross. It's not bloody. It's just pure scares. So if you like that kind of thing, that could be a great book for you. The House Wants Me. Oh, God. Yeah, that was like a big theme in The Haunting of Hill House. Like the house was like claiming people. It was just awful. And some of those scenes in the movie that weren't in the book, particularly at the end, oh my God, I can't even think. I got to go outside and cross the parking lot by myself. There's nobody here but me. I shouldn't be talking about these things. I wanted to show you one last thing before we log off. I finally finished the witch. And you know what? I pulled out the stars. Do you remember I had colors always rotten on this monitor? We know that. But this is like, I forget, I think this is called Halloween with the Familiar. And here's a little black cat. So the witch is just very primitive design, very small. This is definitely available at Ribbon Candy Hooking. I can kit this anytime. This is the one that has all the tweed that goes down the skirt, almost like a spider web. Very fast, very easy to hook. Hit or miss background, all done in purples. And then the little Familiar, the little black cat, is doing his own trick-or-treating with his little jack-o'-lantern filled with fire. But you remember how I had like 3 different like super fancy crazy fibers in the stars? I wanted to do the stars in all these kinds of moonstone and cranberry colors. I plugged in 2 of the stars and they just weren't showing up well enough. So in reality, I have a picture of this in the light in the description of this video. This star is like a butter color, like an apricot butter color. This is like a fluorescent lemon yellow, like really, really ripe. And this is like a salmon color. So very different colored stars. I didn't want to do pure white or pure yellow. But this is done now. This is available. And this is for our witch episode. This is the witch finally finished. So I'm real happy with her. All those things are on Ribbon Candy Hooking. Take a look over the weekend. I'm going to have a busy weekend running around, doing a little bit with fairs and festivals and trying to get the kids to a corn maze. I hope you're going to have a super festive weekend as well. Keep me updated on what you do. Send me photos if you're going to festivals and stuff. I want to know what's going on in that big world out there, what you're doing and what you're finding to do for the holidays that's super fun and festive. Share it with me for sure. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday for coffee time. I'll figure out that episode before we get there. That will be at noon Eastern Standard Time. I certainly hope to see you there. In the meantime, check out all of the links for that I put up tonight. Lots of things happening for Halloween on Ribbon Candy Hooking. It's certainly not too late. Lots of fun, lots of things you can download, lots of PDFs and stuff too. So take a look at that. It'd be fun to pick up some Halloween stuff this weekend. Wishing a quick recovery to this. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Whitney, I hope that you're feeling better. Jocelyn, too, that little devil. Lovely witch just catching up. Super. Oh, thank you so much. Thumbs up. Thank you. I took photos of the fairy tale rugs today. Lisa, that's excellent. Obviously, I dropped the ball on the weekend hugely. I couldn't rejiggle the things that I had tickets and stuff for. I'm so sorry about that. If you can share the fairy tale rugs. I know they're going to Texas, I think, soon. So I would love to see, if it's possible, I would love to share images, but if it's not okay, because I know it's maybe not okay, but I think we'd all love to see the fairy tale rugs. And remember, this month's Design Like series is designed like the fairy tale storybook, so lots of designs will come out of that if you do that with me. That's coming up soon. Have a great night. You too, Zoe, Lorraine, Karen, everybody.